Good day, class. Today we're going to be discussing my portfolio presentation on the conflict between law and morality. So my research was to investigate if social pressure has a propensity to affect obedience of the law. Here's the abstract, and I'll just be brief in certain areas of this. Debate on the justification to break the law in a large democracy based on the moral obligation of the citizens continues to elicit different opinions, with some people arguing that in certain circumstances the rule of the law should come second, while others argue that the rule of the law should always be obeyed in all cases. This is based on the fact that it is natural for human beings to have individual principles that guide their day-to-day life, and then there is the rule of the law that codifies general norms as legal obligations that determine how humans relate to each other. Disobedience of the law when morally right has had numerous supporters, agreeing on the circumstance that justifying obedience has been quite the contentious issue. Given the importance of human conscience and individual values, I believe there are exceptional circumstances that constitute conscience be followed over the law. Now, this research investigates the impact of social pressure on a person's propensity to obey the law. Hence, to further explore the conflict between the rule of law and morality, the following research question was designed. Now, this was mine. This isn't the 2016 dataset question. Does the social pressure of society affect a person's propensity to obey the law? Now, to answer the research question, the following hypothesis was designed. The social pressure of society does not affect a person's propensity to obey the law. Now, of course, I analyzed that using the chi-square analysis of the applicable variables. And just a little bit about GCSS. It's a biennial survey that collects information on a general sample of American society. It is verbatim the only full probability personal interview survey designed to monitor changes in both social characteristics and attitudes currently being conducted in the United States. Now, for my research in particular, it was about 3,000 people were asked the research question, and large of those didn't reply. I think the actual number was 1,963 off the top of my head. And they were asked how the social pressure of society does not affect a person's propensity to obey the law. During questioning and analysis, obey the law, of course, was always a dependent variable. And social pressure or exceptional circumstances, which I didn't put in here for the purpose of avoiding the wording, was the independent variable. Now, findings did suggest that human consciences and the implications thereof should be considered carefully when designing and implementing laws, which I will discuss more down in the section below. Additionally, criminal justice will benefit by understanding under exceptional circumstances morals will supersede codified norms and laws, and that was always true, in particular for the educated, which was a little counterintuitive. Of course, I had extensive literature review, which explains his view. And we end with a substantive discussion and a conclusion. Literature review. According to Dr. Jerry, 2018, moral consciousness is a thought process that allows an individual to decide wrong and right based on the value system that the individual has been socialized to. Therefore, what is morally right for one individual might be morally wrong for another, depending on the type of value system the individual has been exposed to. Dr. Jerry explains that the moral consciousness is a product of wanting to belong, inspired by the existing structures of a social class and how they behave. Clearly, moral conscience of an individual is immensely influenced by the society and the individual that belongs to. And I take a pause there. That's in particular very true for other areas of the world. For instance, in a country such as Sudan, premarital sex would, by all intents and purposes, be immoral and punishable by death. But, in the United States is a little bit different. It's not actually immoral for people to have premarital sex. So just a caveat off that. The rule of law, on the other hand, has authoritative and influential powers over the society despite the social origins of an individual. The rule of the law, therefore, restricts individual moral consciousness. Everyone in society is under the rule of law, which is true. And if you can take a step back to a greater picture, as in this COVID-19 situation, the law is restricting a lot of people from carrying on day-to-day life. And there are many people that disagree and would even like to continue working, but of course that's not allowed. Previous literature on the relationship between the rule of law and moral consciousness revealed that the rule of law is a direct reflection of society's moral conscience. Dr. Haig, 2017, explains that the rule of law between different countries differs because of significant differences in the collective moral consciousness. Different countries, going back full circle to what I briefly mentioned. He further supports these sentiments by explaining that under exceptional circumstances, if the rule of law conflicts with genuine moral consciousness, the rule of law should be repealed. Of course, that might be to some a extremist perspective, but it does hold some weight, which we will see in the experiment down below. However, the rule of law might be opposed by certain minority groups since they feel that their rights are not fully recognized by current laws. And of course, we could use ethnicity, sexual orientation, and other examples of that. Okay, getting to the bread and butter here, and pretty straightforward. Okay, the study used a data set from the GCSS 2016 to test the hypothesis, of course, random sampling of 1,363 respondents that participated by responding. Of course, remember that there was almost 3,000 people asked, but only 1,363 people responded. The dependent variable was, and the question was the special case. Well, the dependent variable was to obey the law. Test of significance. The nominal obedience of the law of vice conscience and the categorical ranked importance of the law using the chi-square test as a population representation of 0.9500 or confidence rate of 95% or a null hypothesis of 0.05. Now, just to briefly summarize that, dependent variable, of course, is obedience. Dependent variable is ranked importance of the law. And these two values are surprisingly the same if you paid attention during the lessons. The 0.95% general population representation can be translated to say that we have a 95% confidence that our results are a greater accurate representation of the society, and in this case, American society, or we can say that there is a 0.05 or a 5% chance that we will experience a null hypothesis. So all three values mean the same thing, just expressed a little different. Hypothesis. There exists no relationship in the people's propensity to follow their conscience over the law under exceptional circumstances. Of course, that's H1 is your null hypothesis. And HO, which is a valid hypothesis, there exists a relationship in people's propensity to follow their conscience over the law under exceptional circumstances. It's always important to pay attention to under exceptional circumstances. Now, the data didn't really say what the exceptional circumstances, but you can fill that in with your imagination. Okay, the significance level, as previously mentioned, is 0.05. That's going to be your null hypothesis threshold. And as previously mentioned, okay, not to get long-winded here. Straight to the testing. Okay, statistics suggest that people have a propensity to follow their conscience over the law under exceptional circumstances. And then, of course, statistics circumstances do not follow obedience to the law. Most people obey the law without exception. Screw those values up in retrospect, but you get the point. Now get into the fun data here. So when we ran a cross tabulation at the 0.05 level, which we remember the 0.05 null threshold is for two variables. 0.01 is for one variable. Now, if you at a glance, we can see that most people, and that is whether they opted to say that they would always obey the law or follow conscience over the law, all said that the obedience to the law is the fourth or almost the least important thing to consider in exceptional circumstances. So, at a glance, as typically through the research, the cross-tabulation allows us to see that there seems to be a correlation between drawing a blank here, conscience and the propensity to a positive correlation between conscience and the propensity to follow the law. Alright, sorry about the interruption here. Let's move this along to not take too long. So, of course, after conducting a chi-square test, we can identify, based on a two-sided test value, that there is no indication of null hypothesis. So you can rule that out. And then, of course, down to our decision, which is going to discuss. Suggest 0%. Therefore, with a 95% confidence rating, we can say that yes, people do have a tendency to follow conscience over the law. And of course, I've graphed it below so you can see it. This is, of course, keep in mind that it may be skewed due to the lack of participants. However, it is an accurate representation of the option for conscience over the law. 58.33% follow their conscience and 41.67% follow the law. Alright, findings. I'll just read it here. Descriptive statistics for the majority of people interviewed said they would follow conscience. 58 biased to 42%, of course, and among the participants, so that shows to degree, were more likely to obey the law than those with a bachelor's, master's, and all the way to a doctorate. So, interesting enough is that the higher the level of education, the more people insist on following their conscience over exceptional circumstances, which is really counterintuitive because, you think the inverse is true, but you can actually get a snapshot of that on the cross tabulation here. And as you can see, as the education goes up, less and less people report following the law, with the exception of a law degree, which is a little comical in my opinion. But just that. Then, of course, on the ordinal scale of 1 to 5, people always rate conscience. The law is a constantly significant thing. Remember, if we scroll back up, they all say that law should be about the second last consideration in decision making. Okay, and then of course the importance of the law. Most people ranked it as the fourth important thing. And of course the lambda directional measure suggests that there is a slight positive correlation between the propensity to follow conscience over the law. And you could argue the significance of it. And of course, no hypothesis threshold is below the standard rate. Okay, just again, some positive directional measures here. I'm just going to go into details because I'm on 2 minutes time, and just talk about 2 minutes of the discussion here. Okay, so with regard to investigating the effect of social pressure on obeying the rule of the law, the study found correlation between social pressure and disobeying the rule of the law. Findings suggest that people have a propensity to follow their conscience over the law under acceptable circumstances. Notably, the study found out that the level of education determined whether a person was likely to disobey the rule under social pressure. More educated people have a capacity to disobey the rule of the law under exceptional circumstances. Keyword: exceptional circumstances. This observation concurs with past research on moral conscience by Dr. Jerry in 2018. That the process of making a decision is a thought process. Hence, more educated people are used to thinking, or believing their capacity to make moral decisions compared to their counterparts with lower levels of education. So self-confidence in education. One can argue that. Educated people are expected to disobey the rule of the law when they feel that their moral conscience is right, which is statistically higher than those with less education. Okay. In the conclusion, of course, the study has fulfilled the aim of investigating whether people tend to disobey the rule of the law when under social pressure. It was clear that exceptions should exist where people are allowed to disobey the rule of law if their moral conscience is right. Hence, findings of the study support past literature reviewed by Dr. Haig, 2017, and others. Laws should be repealed if it conflicts with genuine moral consciousness. Additionally, findings suggest that social pressures influence moral consciousness. Hence, the rule of law is still important given the deciding universal morality is almost impossible. So, the law does have its merits. Further research is necessary where more independent variables are included in the model. Independent variables can be demographics, age, gender, income levels, and overall geographical location. respondents. So that's it, guys. I tried to wrap it all in 15 minutes. A lot of information. So thanks for watching.